Well, hello there, friends.
We're in a different place today because we have Tori here with us.
And Tori is amazing. So she's just an exceptional human being that I wish everyone had a Tori in their life.
Yeah.
Aww. Because she has so much wisdom, but she's also so much fun to hang out with.
Yes.
She's like the perfect balance between cheerleader, and then today she was telling us things that like she's like trying to challenge us in. We're like, you're
she's
cheerleading
like the
and
sassy friend
challenger.
who will keep you in check.
Yeah.
I get a little feisty sometimes. I'm like, oh, sorry. That might have been a little bold.
But she's so cute, so when she gives me, like, she's like, Riley, you need to push more in this area. I'm like, but you're so cute, okay. I can't get mad at you.
But I think the cool thing, and Chad and I were actually talking about this, is like, I don't want to say you're malleable, but you're teachable. You know what I mean? So it's like, when you ask for advice and we give it, it's like you actually take it. And that's really nice. Like, it's not falling on deaf ears.
Right, because we were actually talking about this before. It's like sometimes you have this friend that like you love so much and you see them maybe doing something that's like toxic or detrimental and you want to speak into them and it feels like you're just hitting a brick wall. And so that can be really draining too.
My mentor says that a great leader always continues to come from a posture of a teachable spirit. And that's so true, like no matter when you go through life, like never losing that curiosity or that teachability.
Yeah. Right.
Because God is constantly molding us. And even the other day I had this vision of like wet clay. But what if I let the clay of my heart dry up? How much can God mold it if it's dry?
Right.
But if it's wet, he can like shape it
Yeah.
and make it something even greater than what it is.
Yeah. So we have some questions. Also, we didn't mention this. Tori got married. Was it?
Y'all, it'll be a year next month.
This is so exciting.
Wow.
Her and her husband are, it sounds weird to say husband because most of my friends are like boyfriend. Her and her husband are literally goals. Like,
Amazing.
yeah.
She has a YouTube. People need to check out her channel.
Yeah.
So just quickly tell them what it's about because it's amazing.
Okay, so I started my channel like the end of April last year, and it really was just an act of obedience to God because I didn't know how to edit videos. I didn't know anything about the YouTube world at all, but God's really used it. And a lot of my videos are right here on this couch. And the whole point of it is just to have real conversations. And like, I just want you to feel like you're a friend of mine and we're sitting down talking about stuff that could be hard, could not be, but my hope is just that people leave encouraged and with like a deeper craving to know God.
So
yes.
good.
Yeah, that's it.
It's so good too. Like I said, I was watching it the other morning eating breakfast and
Aww.
I was like crying. And
I was having breakfast with you and I didn't even know it.
yeah. So we're so blessed and lucky to have you here today. Okay, so
why we're asking Tori all these questions is because she's a season ahead of us, and we also think that she's done some really important and just made some really wise decisions that, as someone that's known her for a while, I've seen her walk out the season of like her dating her now husband, them getting married, and then how they've entered so gracefully into marriage. And so I just thought it'd be so cool if we could sit down and like ask her questions, because I want to have a story that is not the same but has the same reflection of Christ in it.
yeah.
And so how can I gain from her? Hence why we're about to ask the question.
It kind of
serious, the notebook is out.
Well, it just reminds me like when you were saying that, I was listening to this sermon, this podcast this morning, and it's just how God wants us to succeed at relationships. And I think a lot of times we're like, why is this not working? Why haven't I found my person yet? But there are certain things that like God wants to deposit into our lives before he gives us someone to walk in your purpose with you. And I think a lot of times for me, like I'm such an independent spirit. I'm like have a lot of like career ambitions, and so I think a lot of times like I need to establish myself first. But you guys are both, like you and Chad are both like already so accomplished, but I know you have so much ahead of you too. So it's like,
I feel like we're just starting.
Yeah, and it's like that is really the true example of finding someone that you can like walk shoulder to shoulder with and you step into your purpose together. How did you find your purpose with Chad? I don't know if that's even a question, but that's kind of just like where my heart's at, like wanting to hear you speak into that.
Okay, so I think so just a background story. I had multiple relationships prior to Chad, kind of long term, but toxic. And I feel like when I was in those relationships, my purpose or my calling and like what I wanted to do in the future never aligned with what they wanted to do. And when I started dating Chad, what was different was all of our ambitions, all of our goals, and all the things we wanted to do were so similar that like we knew getting together, it would only like, it would be like a springboard. Like we would propel each other into it because we could build it together. And we were really like very intentional about not building anything together until we were married. Like we wanted that foundation of God, like we wanted that sanctity of marriage before we built anything necessarily together. But it was just like an eye-opening thing when you meet that person who's like so in line with you spiritually. And that's why the Bible says to be equally yoked is so important, because you don't want, you know, like if that person is going ahead of you, or like either way, whether that's the girl or the guy, like you want to be equally yoked. That way you're carrying that, your calling and your purpose forward together.
So good.
And I think it's really easy when you're, you know, I was the same way. Like I was single for a couple years, and I think that process, like I have an entire singleness series on my channel, and I talk about how like being single is a very sweet season to be embraced.
Yeah.
And you learn so much about yourself and like what you need as a person, and like it just like develops your relationship with God. And I think it's really easy to get lost inside of relationships and think that like that person is gonna satisfy your soul, and like that's not the purpose of marriage. Like the purpose of marriage is not your happiness, it's your holiness. And the earlier you like realize that, I think you're gonna have like a better picture, like a better understanding of like what you're walking into. I think a lot of marriages fail because they think that they're walking in selfishly, like, oh, this is gonna satisfy me, this is gonna make me happy. And so when anything hits the fan, that's why divorce is rampant, you know. But it's like if you walk in and your goal, like your aim is holiness, you'll get holiness and happiness. But if your goal is just happiness, you're gonna fall short on both.
Your purpose can't be completed by the other person, but it has to be aligned.
And it's not to say that like you can't have different like career paths. Chad and I are like, we are it's like we have an interesting dynamic because we're together like literally 24/7. Like we work together, we live, like everything is together, and not every couple like can withstand that. Just like honestly like being in that person's vicinity the entire day, you know.
Personal space.
Like, you know. And so like it's not to say that you can't have two career paths. It's just it's more of like a spiritual alignment, and like knowing that like no matter what Chad decides to do with or without me, no matter what I try to do with or without him, we are so spiritually aligned that we know that we can continue to propel each other into those like separate purposes too.
I also love what you were saying about during the season of singleness, how there were certain things that you learned, and
oh my gosh.
what are there some things that like just come up to the top? More like general things, or more just like general things that you feel like you can, you know, pass on as nuggets of wisdom to people that are like in that season.
Yeah, I think what's really fun in the singleness season is praying over your future husband. I like had a blast reading the 31 prayers for my future spouse, and at that time I didn't know that was gonna be Chad, but it was like the coolest just like realization that like at that point in time I didn't know who he was, where he was, who he was with, what he was doing, but I knew that he was covered in prayer, and that like when I was gonna meet him someday, that I had already prayed, like he was already covered in my prayer. And like it was just like such a sweet thing in that single season. It gave me contentment for where I was too, because I think a lot of times when you're single, you're like just waiting to meet the guy, and then you meet the guy and you're like waiting for the engagement, and then the engagement you're like waiting for marriage, and then you get married and you're like, okay, now kids, you know. It's just like there's always a next step, there's always like a next season. And if I could encourage you in any way, it's like stop and embrace this undivided time that you have with God to like get to know yourself. And something I make all of my single friends do, like literally make them do this, is write their list of non-negotiables.
Yes.
And sign it as if it's a contract.
The first time I ever met you, you told me that, and I did it.
It's so good. But I think it's just like putting it down on paper and saying like, this is what I'm not, like this is what I deserve, this is what I'm praying for, and then because we have such a cool God, it's like watch him exceed everything you wrote down and like be even better than you had hoped, dreamed, imagined, because that's the kind of God we serve. That's his character. So
love those two things, like pray over him and then write your non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes singleness is just such a hard season, especially in the culture that we live in, because singleness is treated like a disease. and we like that, you know, like I'm sure if you're single and you're listening to this and you've had that question like, oh, you're still single, or you've had that look, and you know people they think you should be in a relationship, but it's like understanding that your love story, yes, there's gonna be someone that comes along on your love story, but ultimately your love story is with you and God. And in a season of singleness, it's such an important time to get that devotion, like that true pure devotion with God. Because think about it, like once you're married, and like you said, you're always with Chad, like there's it's just that's it, like you made that decision for the rest of your life. But in singleness, I'm making a decision to myself first, and in doing that, I'm making a decision to God. And it's such a holy covenant to be under.
No, it is. It's like I think the whole thing is like embrace it as a fun season. Like I think everyone in singleness is just like ready to get out of it, you know? And it's like, no, enjoy it. Like it's the last time you'll ever be single, you know? Like I will never be single ever again in my life, you know what I mean? Like, so embrace it while it's here. It's a very short season of time. Like if you think about like your 20s versus your 30s through your 80s, you know what I mean?
True.
Like it's like a short period of time. Like and so it's like embrace it while you have it, like live life to the fullest, go on dates with yourself, like I don't know,
Like overseas trips.
Yes, like I did it, you know, like it's just I think just enjoy it and embrace it, and don't think of it as like I'm just in this season until I'm in the next one. It's like, no, I'm here, I'm gonna live it up with Jesus, and you know, when my husband comes along, it'll be in God's perfect timing.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and
thank you, Tori, for your wisdom.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And check out her channel, it's amazing. Follow her on Instagram, all those things.
All the things.
And just thank you so much for joining our conversation, and we hope that there was something there that you could relate to, or some wisdom. Even when I'm just listening to Tori, I'm like, I've heard this, like some of the things she said, and some of them I haven't, but either one, I'm still learning from them.
It's so inspiring. So, thank you.
So cute.
And I feel like this is also just like a little like nugget, it is so important to have people in your life that are a season ahead of you, and to gain wisdom from them and ask them hard questions, because they have something to give. You know, if you're single and there's a friend that's dating, or if you're single and there's a friend that's married, asking them questions, because like you said, what did you say earlier about the you don't want us to step on the
landmines.
Yeah,
I'm like, I've already stepped on them, you don't need to, like, learn from my mistakes. See you in the next one.
See you next
time. Bye.
Reminds me of the summertime, way back in 2003. Hey, I've been chilling on the coast with my